Hey everyone, and welcome to the show. Have you ever thought about how a chance meeting with something wild could completely change how you see life, like your connections and even yourself?
Yeah, it's really interesting how this book digs into that idea and shows how nature can make us rethink what really matters.
Totally. And that's what we're diving into today with Raising Hare by Chloe Dalton. It's this beautiful blend of nature writing and a personal story. And if you love exploring these kinds of topics, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives like this. You can find a link to Raising Hare on Amazon down in the description. It might seem like a simple story about someone taking care of an injured baby hare, but there's so much more to it. It makes you think about our bond with nature, the rhythms of life that are bigger than us, and the surprisingly deep feelings a small creature can stir up in us.
Right from the start, you're drawn into a very specific place and time. What really stood out to you about that first encounter with the hare?
Well, Dalton creates this really vivid picture of winter, like a frosted white world with
Hmm.
frozen cobwebs and this lone kestrel soaring above. And then there are lean foxes, hungry from the harsh weather. Even a dead pigeon with its bloody clotted down is this reminder that survival is tough out there.
Uh-huh.
And it's in this setting that she finds the leveret.
What's interesting is that she doesn't immediately jump to the leveret's rescue. Instead, her first thought is about how humans might disrupt things, especially loose dogs. It really makes you consider how our actions, even the unintentional ones, can have ripple effects in nature.
I know, right? And then she approaches the leveret so carefully. I was struck by how she instantly understood the importance of the mother hare's scent.
That part about lamb fostering was a great example. It shows how ewes totally depend on scent to recognize their lambs, like it's hardwired into them, and that's true for a lot of animals. It really highlights how our interference could scare the mother off.
Exactly. So she's super careful and picks up the leveret using only dead grass so she doesn't leave her scent on it. It's a small detail, but it shows how much she respects its wildness from the very beginning.
Hmm.
But almost as soon as she takes it in, she starts to doubt herself.
That feeling of regret and questioning is so relatable, right? Like that fear of making a bad error of judgment, of taking it away when maybe she shouldn't have, and then worrying that it would probably die. It really shows the responsibility she suddenly feels and how unpredictable nature can be.
It does. And it
Yeah.
makes you compare this initial hesitation to her connection with nature as a kid.
It's like life took her on a totally different path, far away from those early experiences in the natural world.
For sure. She talks about how she spent her childhood summers rescuing all kinds of animals, hedgehogs, jackdaws, even a greenfinch, all thanks to her mother encouraging her. But then she ends up in London, immersed in this world of politics and foreign policy with high stakes and constant action.
You can really feel the pull of that fast-paced life in her writing. Like the adrenaline rush of crises and traveling all the time gave her a different kind of satisfaction, a different kind of connection.
Yeah, she even quotes from The Little Prince about how real comradeship comes from being united on the same rope, climbing towards the same peak.
That image of having a shared purpose, of being willing to be the last to go down in a crisis, it perfectly captures the intense bond she felt with her colleagues in that world. It's a very different kind of connection compared to quietly observing a single wild creature.
Absolutely. And then the pandemic happens and forces her back to the countryside. It wasn't exactly the peaceful escape you might imagine, though.
Definitely not. She describes feeling restless and anxious at first, like she was struggling to adjust to the slower pace. Even her colleague is worried about her keeping the leveret, asking what she'll do with it when she has to go back to London. But then her stubborn side comes out, that quiet determination to make it work. I will work it out, she says. And that leads to the practical challenges of caring for this tiny creature, which is such a fascinating part of the story.
So the first thing she does is call her sister for advice on what to feed it. They decide on a lactose-free milk substitute, something like what you'd give a kitten.
Mhm.
And then there's this hilarious delivery of this huge, muddy bucket of powdered milk meant for lambs, along with sterilizing fluid. It's this absurd amount of milk for something so small, it weighed only 100 grams less than an apple, as she puts it.
And then she has to create a makeshift feeding bottle using an old cosmetics bottle and a pipette.
Yeah.
It really shows the level of care and attention this fragile creature needed and how dedicated she
Oh,
was.
for sure. She was so mindful of how fragile it was, handling it super gently. And all this is happening in the setting of the barn.
The barn is more than just a place. It's almost like a character in the story with its own history and connection to the land.
Absolutely. It's made of rough gray stone, and it's even marked on maps from the 1700s. It was originally used to shelter sheep with 3 walls enclosing a central space. She'd planned to make it into a project, maybe as a way to escape her busy political life. But it was a total ruin overgrown with weeds before she transformed it into her home. That central space, which used to be for sheep, is now her garden. It's kind of symbolic of her own changing focus, right?
It's a beautiful parallel, shifting from a space for livestock to one for nurturing growth and quiet observation.
Yeah, definitely. And to care for the leveret, she has to make sure it's super quiet. She learns that any kind of stress can kill them in captivity, so every little noise like a pan clattering, a faucet running, or even a raised voice is something she has to be mindful of.
She even interprets that faint ch-ch-ch sound the leveret makes as a sign that it's relaxed, like a little reassurance in those early uncertain days. She's learning to read its subtle cues.
And then she starts to notice its feeding habits, those tiny ivory paws gripping the bottle, kneading the air in what she calls trembling, milky ecstasy. Its ears vibrating with effort, its nose constantly twitching, and those tiny whiskers tickling her hand. It's such a vivid picture of this little creature's will to survive,
Yeah.
and even its appearance is described with such detail.
Yeah, she mentions the coal black ear tips, the soft gray throat, the ivory muzzle, the sooty gray nostrils, and that brindled back. It's clear she's not just looking at it, she's really seeing every tiny feature. It's like this intense observation, which is necessary for its care, is also making her connect with nature more broadly.
Totally. But she keeps reminding herself, and us, that even though she's growing attached and it's undeniably adorable, it was a wild creature. It's not like a pet that's been domesticated for generations.
And that awareness of its wildness guides how she cares for it. Even something like gently brushing its chin to remove dried milk, which it couldn't reach on its own, is more about practicality than just being affectionate. It's about finding that balance between caring for it and respecting its wild nature.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she describes how it would stay perfectly still for hours in its little nest box, with just the tip of its nose showing. That instinct to hide is always there, reminding you how vulnerable it is in the wild. And then there's this turning point when she decides to let it out of the pen.
Yeah, that moment when she frees it from confinement, trusting its instincts, even though it might mean some mess or even carpet damage, it really changes their relationship. It's like an act of respect for its wildness.
It is, and it leads to the leveret cautiously exploring her house and garden. You see it carefully washing its face on the stairs, tucking its paws in. She tells some people about it, but she's also downplaying how attached she's getting, maybe because she's worried about what others will think or because she doesn't fully understand her own feelings yet.
That fear of being judged for feeling so connected to a wild animal, for being seen as unserious and over-emotional, I think a lot of people can relate to that, especially in a world that often separates humans from nature.
I agree. And by watching it closely, she starts to understand its wildness on a deeper level, like its preference for open spaces, its avoidance of enclosed areas, that instinct to be on the lookout for danger. It's perspective we often miss as humans.
That constant need for an unobstructed view to survive, it's essential for a hare. Their senses are always alert for any sign of threat.
And then there's this surprisingly sweet evening routine. The leveret is brought inside, often resting on the windowsill while she reads, and eventually even sleeping in her bedroom. It seems to go against the idea that hares are solitary creatures.
You're right. While it doesn't cuddle up to her like a pet would, that need to keep her in sight suggests a different kind of connection. Maybe it learned to associate her with safety, or maybe it's a temporary social bond that formed because it was so dependent on her early on. It challenges what we think we know about solitary wild animals.
And then you can't believe how fast it grows. It's amazing how quickly they develop in those first few weeks.
Compared to how long it takes humans to grow up, their accelerated development is incredible. They get 8 times bigger in just a fraction of the time. Even the size of its hind feet becomes a sign that it's becoming more independent. This rapid growth is crucial for survival in the wild.
She soon finds she doesn't need to feed it while it's nestled in a cloth anymore. It starts climbing right onto her lap for its meals. And then you see its appearance changing with the arrival of spring.
Yeah, that shift in color from the dark chocolate brown of its baby coat to lighter cream colors on its paws and sides, while its back and ears stay darker. It's a beautiful example of how it adapts to the changing seasons and the landscape.
It really is a visible sign of its connection to the changing year. But then this darker side of the story emerges a shadow cast over their peaceful coexistence, the long history of humans hunting hares.
It's a stark contrast between her care for this leveret and the historical view of hares as just game animals. It's unsettling and forces us to confront the less compassionate side of how humans have interacted with the natural world.
She comes across these incredibly detailed descriptions of hare hunting in old texts like Gascoigne's The Noble Art of Venery. And the recipes are pretty intense. Hare in wurts, hare with blood and bread, even hare with chocolate, and this elaborate lièvre à la royale, which is fit for royalty and uses all kinds of rich ingredients, including the hare's own blood.
Imagining her reading those violent accounts right next to the Leveret must have created such a clash of feelings, almost like a betrayal of the trust that was developing between them. It makes you think about the long and often brutal history of human dominance over nature.
Definitely. But then she finds a completely different perspective in the poems of William Cowper. He was going through a really tough time, and he wrote this beautiful epitaph on a hare, expressing genuine affection for the animal. It's so different from the hunting manuals.
Cowper's poems offer this counterpoint, showing that humans can have more empathetic and personal connections with these animals. It highlights the possibility for different kinds of human-animal relationships.
And she learns about how vulnerable leverets are born above ground, without a burrow for protection exposed to cold snow and rain.
Yeah, they don't have that underground shelter from the start, so they're super susceptible to the elements. The mother hare has to constantly clean and dry their fur, which is crucial for them to survive those early stages.
And even though they can adapt to all kinds of landscapes, they're still so vulnerable, especially in those first few weeks when they're not fast or agile enough to escape predators. And then there's the increasing threat of farm machinery, which is really scary.
That instinct to freeze and hide, which might work against natural predators in some situations, is tragic when it comes to modern farm equipment. It shows how human technology can disrupt the natural ways animals survive.
That statistic about how many leverets die is pretty sobering. Only about a quarter of them make it to adulthood. It really highlights the challenges they face. And she mentions that hares are crepuscular, which means they're most active at dawn and dusk and during the night. By mid-April, around 6 weeks old, the leveret starts to shed its first coat.
Shifting to a more nocturnal lifestyle is a key adaptation for them. It helps them avoid predators that are active during the day and conserve energy.
Physically, their hind legs are incredibly strong, made for those powerful jumps. As the leveret continues to thrive beyond what she expected, friends start suggesting names for it. But she resists giving it a human name. And this brings up something a lot of people get confused about, the idea that hares are just big rabbits.
Yeah, all that mixing up of terms like jackrabbit and Belgian hare really shows how little people understand the real differences between these two amazing creatures.
They both belong to the same order, Lagomorpha, but they're actually separate species and they can't breed with each other. And the physical differences are pretty obvious.
From the shape of their heads to the length of their ears and those black tips to the color and position of their eyes, the shade of their fur, their build, how they move, even the length of their tails, they each tell a different story of evolution. It's even surprising to learn that rabbits can be aggressive towards hares.
Mark Twain's description of the jackass rabbit in Roughing is pretty funny, and it kind of captures that first impression some people might have. But the way the leveret moves is much more graceful and full of energy.
That description of it as a miniature bucking bronco is perfect. It captures that sudden burst of energy, those joyful vertical leaps, and those crazy midair flips. It's pure, unadulterated energy.
And they're so fast, way faster than humans, and even comparable to a cheetah when you consider their size.
Yeah.
Of course, that speed is essential for escaping all the predators they have to deal with.
Foxes, different kinds of eagles and hawks, crows, even house cats, and a whole bunch of mustelids like badgers, ferrets, stoats, weasels, martins, otters, and even wolverines in some places. The list of threats is pretty long.
And even with all those dangers, they're incredible jumpers. They can clear heights of up to 2 meters and distances of almost 3 meters, and they can even swim up to a kilometer if they need to. It shows how strong they are. But because they have so much muscle and a fast heart rate, they're also prone to capture myopathy, which is a muscle condition that can be fatal when wild animals are under extreme stress.
That vulnerability to capture myopathy shows how bad it is to keep them confined and how important it is to minimize stress when handling them.
Which brings us back to the idea that hares run for pleasure and would be miserable if they were kept in captivity. But that same speed and agility that lets them escape predators also makes them a target for hunters, which is a sad fate.
It's interesting how hunters often write about hares with respect, admiring their resilience and spirit, even though they're hunting them. It's a complicated relationship.
And of course, we can't forget the March hare in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, who's always a bit crazy. But the leveret in this story has a completely different personality.
Yeah, it's even gentle temper and unwavering sweetness of character are mentioned throughout the book. Even its claws, which are surprisingly blunt, never scratch her. It's a gentle creature.
And it develops these cute little habits like moving silently behind her, its love of sunbathing, its dislikes, and this quirky habit of chewing on soft objects, which she calls ironing.
Those little quirks like the chewing and those energetic runs through her bedroom at dawn and dusk really bring its personality to life.
And it's so fascinated by different textures and sounds. It's really charming. But then the story shifts to folklore and mythology, where hares are often seen in a more ambiguous light.
It's interesting how her positive experience with the leveret contrasts with the traditional view of hares as flighty, rash, erratic, and spooky. Tells you a lot about how humans view wild animals.
There's so many negative associations, from Aesop's fables to old stories about houses burning down after a hare was seen, and the superstition that a pregnant woman seeing a hare could cause her baby to have a hare lip. There's even an old poem with 77 names for the hare, all meant to ward off bad luck, calling it the Scare the Man, the Faith Breaker.
And then there's that belief about witches turning into hares or having them as familiars, which adds a whole other dark and scary layer to the folklore. That incantation from Isabel Gowdy is chilling.
It is. And yet, for every negative association, there seems to be a positive one, often linked to ancient pagan beliefs.
The hare can be a symbol of virtue renewal and even self-sacrifice in some traditions, but it's also linked to witchcraft and bad luck. It's a complex and contradictory duality. It's interesting that rabbits, which are often seen as symbols of fertility, aren't usually connected to witchcraft.
As the author suggests, maybe this mixed reputation has more to do with us humans projecting our fears and misunderstandings onto wild animals, onto things we can't easily understand or control. Even the word hare just means gray in Old English, which is fitting for an animal that's hard to define. And to her, this little leveret is too innocent to carry the weight of all that history and superstition.
That choice to see the leveret for what it is without all those layers of folklore is really powerful. It's about being present and seeing things clearly.
And watching the hare in its natural environment, even within her garden, makes her appreciate all the little details she never noticed before. She sees her own familiar space with new eyes.
That quote from Gascoigne about how a hare has predictable habits within its territory shows how much she's paying attention now. She's gone from just glancing at things to really understanding the hare's routines and behavior.
She starts to enjoy gardening, noticing the differences between individual birds and feeling more connected to all the wildlife around her. It's like the leveret opened up a hidden world right outside her door. It makes you realize how much we miss when we're rushing through life limited by our own senses and lack of observation.
Even the leveret's silent movements become a way for it to communicate a language she's learning to understand. Its stillness can mean fear. A sudden twitch can mean it's alert.
And she starts to carefully observe its resting positions, how it likes to have open sight lines and something to support its back, the way it often sits right in her office doorway, almost like it's deliberately keeping her company while still feeling safe.
Those little details about its sleeping habits and preferences show that it's always balancing the need to rest with the need to stay vigilant against danger. It's a delicate balance.
And as she gets more attacked, she also becomes more aware of danger, both real and imagined threats that are always present for wild creatures.
Living in the safety of a city might have made her less sensitive to the constant risks that wild animals face. Every day, she's becoming more attuned to those dangers through the leveret.
A close call with a sheepdog. Those buzzards and kestrels circling overhead. She starts to see them not just as birds, but as potential predators in the hare's world. Even the unexplained noises on the roof at night make her worry about owls hunting nearby.
Those lightweight casts of bones and fur she finds on the ground are a reminder of the natural food chain, the cycle of life and death that we often don't see in our sheltered human lives.
And then there's the first time the leveret disappears and comes back, that moment of panic when it doesn't show up one evening.
You can feel how anxious she gets. It really shows how strong the bond between them has become, even though it's unexpected.
Finding it safe under the plum tree is a huge relief. But then she sees it jump over the wall, which is almost unbelievable.
That incredible display of agility reminds you that it's a wild animal and she can't fully control or protect it.
But after she lets it out again at night, it runs off with pure joy. And then it eventually leaves for good, seemingly, to join other hares. The feeling of loss she experiences and how her priorities change are really powerful.
It's a turning point for her, realizing that her old life in the city, with all its demands and importance, might not hold the same appeal anymore.
And then, surprisingly, it comes back, often muddy and damp. She even sees it interacting with a wild hare on a pile of rubble. And these visits become regular, blurring the line between wild and domestic.
It suggests that it's comfortable both in the wild and in the safety she provides. It's a unique and unusual dynamic.
It's funny, it's still scared of men, but it seems to accept a female friend. And its reaction to a toddler is hilarious.
Mhm.
It even becomes topic of conversation like, would this wild creature ever show itself to other visitors?
Mhm.
And there's this amusing moment when it seems to protest when she gets rid of the sofa.
Those specific social interactions and its reactions to changes in its environment show that it has its own personality and preferences, even though it's a wild animal.
By watching it, she starts to understand the network of hare trails and how much human-made barriers like walls, roads, and traffic affect the way animals move around. Studies about roadkill and the strong homing instinct of hares become really relevant to her.
Those small observations connect her personal experience to bigger ecological issues like habitat fragmentation and the challenges wild animals face in a world dominated by humans.
Looking back on her busy, stressful life, she realizes that she craves quieter, more gentle rhythms. Just having the leveret around calms her down, eases her tension and impatience. But when she sees stoats in her garden, she's reminded of how vulnerable it still is.
That contrast between her old life and the unexpected peace she finds in observing nature, even with its risks and uncertainties, becomes a major theme of the book.
One time, the leveret jumps over the wall and injures its paw, which makes her really worried. She calls the vet for advice, but it's hard to examine a wild hare and there aren't any specific medications for them. It shows how delicate and challenging it can be to care for a wild animal.
Her decision to carefully try giving it a small dose of dog anti-inflammatory medication shows how she has to improvise and how risky it is when you're dealing with a species whose medical needs you don't fully understand.
And then there's the label from the pharmacy, patient, hare, with her listed as the owner. It makes her laugh because it's so absurd to claim ownership of a wild creature. It makes her think about what it means to own another living being and how connected all species really are.
That moment when she sees the absurdity of ownership but also feels so responsible for the leveret is powerful. It makes you think about our ethical relationship with nature.
When the combine harvester shows up in the field next to her house, she gets really scared, especially because the leveret is injured and even more vulnerable.
That huge machine becomes a symbol of how destructive modern agriculture can be.
She reads up on it and learns how the intensification of agriculture has caused hare populations to decline. There's more frequent mowing, the removal of hedgerows, and a shift to planting crops in the winter, which reduces food sources and shelter for hares. It's a huge difference compared to the slower, more traditional ways of farming, she remembers. She becomes so much more aware of the animal's world, down to their sleep patterns and how they navigate.
This links the leveret's individual situation to the bigger problems hares and other wild animals are facing because of changing agricultural practices.
The leveret disappears again, this time for longer, and it really upsets her, but then thankfully it returns. It starts sleeping on a high shelf and grows a thick winter coat with white markings. It even comes inside to get warm near the fire.
Those adaptations to the changing season and its seeking shelter in her house show how resilient it is and how its relationship with her and her home is constantly evolving.
One evening, she sees it at the garden gate, and she gets the feeling that it might recognize her. It's a brief but powerful moment of connection between different species. And then she sees hares boxing, which she learns is usually a female fighting off unwanted male attention. She finds out that the females are solely responsible for raising the leverets, with different accounts of how much care they provide in the wild.
Understanding those social behaviors and reproductive strategies gives you more insight into their lives in the wild.
But the fact that this particular mother hare keeps choosing her garden as a safe haven makes her presence even more special. The end of summer brings in abundance of wild damsons, which are there because the hedgerows haven't been disturbed, which is so important for hares. It's the opposite of what happens when hedges are trimmed and managed all the time. She starts actively making her garden more wildlife-friendly, restoring a pond and planting native species.
That active effort to make her space better for wildlife shows how committed she is to conservation. She's not just watching anymore, she's actively participating.
As the hare approaches its second winter in her garden, she accepts this unusual situation. They might tease her, but she has this feeling that this unique experience isn't over yet. The hare's beauty and behavior continue to touch everyone who encounters it.
There's a sense of acceptance about the unpredictable nature of this connection with a wild animal and a recognition of how special it is to witness it unfold.
And then the most amazing thing happens. She finds two tiny newborn leverets hidden behind her office chair.
Giving birth in her home like that is incredible. It shows how much the hare trusts her and feels safe. It's truly remarkable.
She notices that neither of the newborns has the typical white spot on its forehead. It's also secret and quiet. It's amazing. She thinks about how many leverets hares usually have, and about this mother hare's previous litters. She's worried at first that the mother won't come back, but then she sees her caring for them, grooming them, nudging them, hiding them, and even eating their droppings.
Witnessing those essential early maternal behaviors, which she hadn't seen before, helps her understand the mother hare's dedication and instincts even more.
Soon she finds the bigger leveret with its little hind legs sticking out. It makes her anxious all over again. But the mother hare is calmly nearby, as if to reassure her. The leverets instinctively hide and stay perfectly still, relying on camouflage to protect them.
It's striking to see the contrast between the author's human anxiety and the mother hare's natural calmness in the face of potential danger. It highlights the power of instinct.
The mother hare's joyful leaps and bounds after leaving her hidden babies are so heartwarming. She visits them regularly to feed them at first as often as 3 times a night, then twice. She gently pushes them back into hiding after nursing and then rests on her bench. She mentions that it's been a dry spring, and the leveret's ears start growing so fast.
Those detailed observations give you a glimpse into how the leverets develop and how dedicated their mother is to making sure they survive those vulnerable first few weeks.
Before long, the bigger leveret's paws start sticking out from its hiding place, and the smaller one gets more curious. The mother hare seems comfortable leaving them alone for periods of time. You can see the invisible bond of trust between them. When it rains, they all come inside for shelter. The leverets get bolder, testing the limits with their mother, but reacting differently to the author.
It's fascinating to see their individual personalities develop and how they have slightly different relationships with their mother and with the author. It shows the complex dynamics within this unusual family.
Then they venture outside for the first time at dawn. Both leverets come out together, and you can see them playing right away. They leave their hiding place together and take their first hesitant steps on the grass. The mother hare is watchful, sometimes even carrying the smaller one, which might be more vulnerable.
Those first explorations outside with their mother watching over them are crucial steps towards them becoming independent.
As they get braver, they basically take over her bedroom, so she ends up moving to the spare room. It's entertaining to watch them explore different textures and surfaces, and then something adorable happens. One of them jumps onto her lap.
Those charming and unexpected interactions happen because they're getting more confident and curious. It blurs the line between their wildness and the safety of her home.
One day, she sees the mother hare lying down near the flowers, maybe showing signs of slowing down. And then she sees something unexpected, a third, much smaller and younger leveret hiding in the plants. She realizes it's not a newborn because it's active and its eyes are developing. This makes her think about superifetation, which is a rare phenomenon that could explain why there are leverets of different ages in the same litter.
Superfetation is uncommon in mammals and usually results in babies being born on the same day. But it's a possible explanation for why there are leverets of different ages in the same litter.
She has a scary encounter with a stoat near one of the leveret's hiding places. It's a reminder of the constant threat of predators and makes her feel helpless, even though she's so connected to them. She observes the other animals in her garden: wagtails, larks, a red-legged partridge, and the hare foraging peacefully among them. Even goldfinches come to feed on the same seed heads.
Her garden becomes a mini ecosystem showing the interconnectedness of life, the way different creatures coexist, and the ever-present threat of predators.
The mystery of the youngest leveret continues until she sees it clearly one night. It comes out to feed with its mother and older siblings, and it's remarkable that the older leverets don't seem bothered by it at all.
That peaceful acceptance of the youngest leveret into the family is interesting given how siblings usually behave.
The youngest leveret gradually becomes more independent, while the older ones start exploring the garden, even venturing onto the low wall.
Yeah.
They're always together and continue to interact with their mother. Their growth is amazing, and she notices small differences between them and their mother. They're a bit leaner, their faces are slightly different shapes, and their colors vary, reflecting the change from their winter coats to their late spring coats. Even the length of their whiskers is different, and the bigger sibling starts to show some dominance.
Those subtle observations show the individual development of each leveret and the hierarchy that can form even among wild siblings.
It's so funny to watch them play with the birds and with each other. She even sees them hiccuping while they eat porridge oats and notices that they need their personal space even among themselves. There's one memorable time when one of them chews and swallows a piece of curtain and then becomes obsessed with the curtain, even though it can't reach it anymore. They even figure out how to play with an exercise ball.
Those cute stories really highlight their personalities, showing how curious they are and how they can find entertainment in the most unexpected things.
She starts to see signs that the mother hare is getting older. She moves a little slower. She has a bump on her ankle, a band around her body, and a tuft of fur on her throat. But her eyes are still gentle. She's still responsive, and she's still elegant and composed, which is so different from the leveret's constant energy and readiness to run away. She even has a darker patch of fur between her eyes, another sign of age. She wonders about what their continued interactions mean, realizing how rare it is to observe wild animals so closely for such a long time.
Seeing the mother hare getting older adds a layer of sadness to the story. It highlights the cycle of life and how time passes for everyone, even wild animals.
She's reminded of how fragile life is, especially after reading Cherkasov's observation about how easily hares can be injured. The youngest leveret, despite being the last one born, makes its own space in the undergrowth and learns to navigate the world with surprising resilience. It even acts like its mother, sometimes calm and strong. She sees it perfectly camouflaged among some grass clippings.
Those moments emphasize how fragile life is in the wild, but also how adaptable and resilient these creatures are. They manage to survive against the odds.
As evening comes, a peaceful feeling settles over the garden, with the sound of barn owls calling in the distance. She finds herself adjusting her schedule to the hare's routines. It feels almost surreal to share her garden with 4 hares. It's a privilege she doesn't take for granted. One rainy evening, one of the older leverets comes inside for shelter, and she sees 2 partridges together, which is a hopeful sign that they've found a mate.
Those peaceful moments and the sight of other wildlife thriving alongside the hares reinforce the idea of a balanced ecosystem.
Even when she accidentally startles one of the leverets, it reminds her that they're wild animals. But those occasional inconveniences are worth it for the chance to witness their mysterious natures up close. The smaller leveret, the one that was born in her house, continues to cautiously explore its surroundings.
Being able to observe them so closely comes with a responsibility to not disturb them and to respect their wild instincts.
She starts to feel the weight of knowing that this extraordinary experience can't last forever. And then, heartbreakingly, she finds the youngest leveret sick. Despite her best efforts to help, it dies. Burying it is a profound moment of loss.
The harsh realities of nature and the pain of loss become very real. It's a reminder of how fragile life is in the wild.
Then comes the potato harvest. The field is left empty and silent. It's a shock to see the destruction firsthand. She finds the bodies of young hares and one that's badly injured. Even a buzzard is feeding on a hare out in the open field. It makes her think about how many animals are lost in modern agriculture.
The efficiency of the harvest is contrasted with the devastating impact it has on the animals that used to live in the field. It highlights the hidden cost of how we produce our food.
It makes her question why efficiency is prioritized over the lives of wild animals. She suggests practical solutions like using technology and volunteers to protect leverets and other vulnerable wildlife during harvests. She believes we need more wildlife-friendly farming practices, like leaving grass borders and setting aside land for nature. She even mentions a local trend towards organic farming. She reflects on how much harm has been done to hares throughout history and argues that we need to change our values to include respect and consideration for all living creatures.
Her experience with the leverets has clearly awakened a broader awareness of environmental issues and a desire for more compassionate and sustainable ways of managing land.
She worries more and more because the mother hare has been gone for so long. The death of the leveret and the harshness of the harvest have shown her how fragile their world is. It sparks a surge of curiosity in her, and she starts reading more about nature and agriculture. She becomes fascinated by the colors of the landscape and tries to describe them in her writing. She even finds old herbals and learns about how people used to use plants.
Grief and loss can often lead to a deeper exploration and understanding of nature. It's a way of connecting with its rhythms and secrets on a more profound level.
She delves into the secrets of nature, learning about the hare's specific diet of energy-rich grasses and how some beautiful plants like foxglove are actually poisonous. She reflects on how much she enjoys learning and how much there is to discover. She tries to imagine the world of nocturnal animals. She thinks about the witch hare's true magic, not in terms of evil spells, but in its ability to experience the world through different senses beyond human limitations.
It reflects a growing sense of wonder and an acknowledgement that humans have limited perception. It's a desire to see the world through the eyes of other beings.
And then a moment of hope. The mother hare returns unexpectedly. She looks at the fire, and there's a feeling of connection again. She remembers that no wild animal dies of old age, a reminder of how precarious their lives are. She sees one of the older leverets pushing the boundaries of the wild, its instincts drawing it away from the safety of her garden.
The cycle of life and the pull of both danger and independence are so powerful in that moment.
She thinks she sees 2 hares engaging in courtship behavior out in her field. But being aware of her human biases, she tries not to interpret their actions through a human lens. She knows that their relationship is